far as you're concerned over there.
I think that's what I believe for the time being. Baruch Hashem.
Mhm.
Okay, good morning, Franklin.
Good morning. Good morning.
So we're up to the Mishnah at the bottom of Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Nachri shehilva es Yisrael al chemzoi. So the discussion is: we know if you have chametz in your possession on Pesach, after Pesach, that chametz is asher bahana. Whether it's derabanan, like Reb Shimon, whether it's deraisa, like Reb Yehuda. Now the Gemara wants to understand what is considered having chametz in your possession on Pesach. So Nachri shehilva es Yisrael al chemzoi. A Jew borrowed money from a guy, and as collateral, he put up his chametz. However, this collateral is structured, and that's what the Gemara is going to dig into to understand. It's clearly, in this case, was structured in such a way that as long as the chametz was meshubit to the guy, we look at it if it's in the guy's possession, and therefore it's going to be mutar bana. On the flip side, Yisrael shehil ves nachi al chemtzai achar pesach asher bana, because if we're considering it to be in the malva's possession, so it works both ways. If the guy is the malva, it'll be mutar bana. If the yid is the malva, it'll be asher bana. Rashi tells us Nachri shehil ves Yisrael mois. So the guy lent the yid money. Al chemtzai using the Jews' chametz as collateral. Kodim Pesach. The loan occurred before Pesach. But over a love of Pesach, and then while it was in this state, Pesach passed by. Mutar bahana. After Pesach, it'll be mutar bahana, which really should be difficult for us to understand, because just because I used it as collateral, I didn't pay with it yet we still consider it the guys. So the kamei begamora muki law kisher here hinu etzloi bevesai, where you took this chametz and you didn't keep it in your house, in the Levi's house, in the Jew's house, rather you transferred the chametz into the guy's house. And the chametz physically is in the guy's house throughout Pesach. And the reason why it was in the guy's house is so that if the deadline to pay back the loan passes, and the loiva, the yid, did not pay back the malva, it's not missing collection. It's already collected. It's already in the guy's control. It tells us, it shows us, it reveals to us that from the point that the mashkin was already given to the guy, it's considered the guy's already. Again, we don't yet see a transfer of ownership. So that's all part of what the Gemara is going to discuss, how that transfer of ownership occurs. On the flip side, Yisrael shehil ves anachri, Nami, it would have the same situation. The given to her inu etzloi, since the guy gave the chametz to the yid, and it's in the yid's possession, umatas manli v'lei pare, and the time came, the deadline came to pay the loan, and he did not pay, he shaited the uspay kom lebershusei. We say that the transfer of possession occurred at the time of the loan. So let's see the mechanics of this. Itmar, the Gemara has a beautiful machlokes. Bal choiv, abal choiv, abai amar l'mafrei hu goyim. When a bal choiv takes a mashkin because the loiva did not pay back, l'mafrei hu goyim, we look at it as if he already took ownership of that mashkin when he first gave out the loan. Let's see Rashi. You lent somebody money, and the loiva was mishabed his nechasim to the malva. If I don't pay back by this specific date, you could collect from my possessions. And that deadline occurred, and he didn't pay back. So this is very important, this Rashi. The collection of the collateral that the malva makes today, we almost look at it like a sale. We almost look at it that the day that the malva gave the money to the loiva, that mashkin that he eventually ended up taking as payment, that mashkin is considered in the malva's reshus from the time of the loan. Rav Amar, Einam b'chaskasei, Elamikana laba. We only look at it like the malva has acquired that chayfetz, that mashkin, at the point of time where he actually seizes it, which would be the debt deadline. The Gemara is about to explain what is the nafkamina lalacha, whether or not it's mikana laba or lemafreya. We right off the bat can see obviously that it impacts whose chametz it is, and that the Gemara is going to introduce later in the sugya. But now we're going to focus directly on this machloikis itself. So Dr. Gemara, good morning. Kol heicha the akdish loiva v'zoven loiva. If the loiva was makdished, or the loiva sold it. So during this period, after the loan, but before the deadline occurred, if the loiva made a sale or if the loiva made a hektish, kula alma pligi da'asi malva v'tarif or v'asi malva parif. Everybody agrees that this sale will not be a good sale. The malva can take it, and everybody agrees that the hektish, if the loiva was makdished, the hektish lacks validity, and the malva can go take it back from hektish. Let's see Rashi. Kol echadaktish loiva dechasav b'soiches man oizavan loiva moichan achem kul amalei pligi afilu lerava. Even according to Rava, damar akshav hoyu b'rshus loiva, that the possession of the mashkin doesn't transfer till after the deadline. Moidehu de'ein mechira shelachem mechira. He does agree at least that the mechira is not a good mechira, and veinik de'shei hektish. Why is that? Even if they don't actually belong to the malva, but they're definitely mishubah to the malva. Even though technically the ownership still is with the loiva, but einam b'shusa, he doesn't have complete control over them because there's a shibud on these specific nechasim to pay the malva back his chayv. If a person is makdish his house, it works and his house becomes kodesh. But we learn from there what the symptoms of anything that you donate to hektish, what conditions it has to have. Just like your house you're in complete control of, so too the only thing that you could be makdish are things that you have complete control of. Now, although we said that at ma beiser b'shusay af kol b'shusay, we're going to soon see that that only is by bedek habayis. When it comes to a carbon, the Gemara tells us that hektish is mafkia midei shibud. So if you have an animal that's a mashkin, that's meshubed to pay back a loan with, and you made that into a carbon, that in fact would break the shibud. Bedek habayis does not. Now, so everybody agrees if the loiva sold it, the malva can just take it back from the loiva. As well, we learned that hektish has no validity, and it says also malva uporik. Uparik doesn't mean he can take it. It means he has to redeem it. So you might ask, why would he have to redeem it if the hektish has no validity at all? Zokt Rashi, Uparik min hektish b'devar mu'at. He only has to throw a pittance to hektish to take it. Not because it really needs pigeon. The hektish had no validity. But it's only shalayoymu, kidei shalayoymu, so people shouldn't say hektish yoytzubloy pigeon. So people shouldn't say, oh, bedek habayis, you don't have to be part, you could just take it, because they saw this malva taking it. So therefore we require that the malva give some money to hektish so that it won't look like hektish just goes hefker. And then the goy v'chayvay. Of course, he could use whatever he took from hektish to be goy v'chayv, and if the item that he took back from hektish is not enough to pay back his chayv, it's not worth as much as he lent him, well, now he can add this penny that he used to be paid to the hektish, he can add that to the cheshbon. So the fellow borrowed from me $100. He gave something of $90 value to hektish. I have to go now and pay $1 to hektish to redeem it. So now I'm out $91. I'm out $101. So I have this chayvus worth $10. That I have this chayvus from hektish that's worth $90. I'm out $10 from my original 100 plus the $1 that I have to lay out to make the collection. Like the law says, let's say someone owes you money. There's a court judgment against somebody that he has to pay you $100, and he doesn't want to pay you. So then you have to go back to the bank. You have to go back to the court to have them garnish this guy's wages. Well, guess what? That costs money too. You can also add to the garnishment the amount of money that it costed to petition the court to get that garnishing ruling. Same thing here. Since I had to lay out extra money to go to pay to some hektish, I can just add that to the cheshbon. Kitab be'erchen be'perek Shuma Yisayim hiktish b'tishim money. What if you were makdish? The loiva was makdish something that's worth $90 for your chayve meyamana, but its chayv was worth $100. Moisef malva zeh al halva dinner. The malva adds one dinner. Who paid this on the chasam alalu biyat hektish, and he could be paid his nechasim from hektish b'dinner zeh with this dinner. V'noitlam b'chayvay, and he could take these nechasim that were given to hektish as payment for his chayv. V'dinner the yoiv, and why does he have to give this extra dinner? People shouldn't say that you can just take from hektish without a pigeon. So that's what I mentioned at the drop earlier. Even though we know that hektish, if you makdish something, it breaks the shibud. So Rashi dafka kedusha zuguf ka'amar rava. Kainamais a behemel carbon oy beged shapirsu ala mace. A beged that was meshubed to be paid back, and you covered a mace with it, so it becomes now asher bano, becomes dedicated to the mace. Kahidi avamis kabe istla the milsa the persua yasmi a misna the yisoimim spread this beged on top of a mace. And this beged happened to have been a shubed to the ksuba of the deceased's wife. You don't take it back and give it to the wife. Tamarava kanya misna, the mace is kanyat. Ava kedushas tamim, someone who made a donation to Beth Kabayis, lo yamrinan, you don't say it's mafkir with a shibud, so therefore he can go take it back.
Gus,
So yes.
am I understanding this correctly? Can one makdish something that doesn't belong to him, or are you saying that's the raya that he has some kind of a chazaka in it?
Well, how do you? Let's say I borrowed $100 from you, and that's collateral. I put up an animal.
Right.
That animal belongs to me. We didn't pay back yet, and I makdish it. Now the problem is, even though I own it, you have a lien on it. So
right.
If I give it hektish, you can take away from hektish. But if I'm giving it as a carbon, it breaks your lien.
Who, the owners makdish it, or the
loiva? The loiva.
The loiva. The loiva. So does it belong to the loiva?
Sure, it belongs to the loiva, because even though it's being used as collateral, it's to my house. There might be a lien on it, but it still belongs to me.
Okay.
I'm also a little confused here. I'm confused. You give.
I borrow money from you. I borrow $100 from you, and I make this animal collateral, which means if I don't pay you back by January 2nd, you could come and take this animal. And then before January 2nd, I donate this to hektish. So if I donate it to Beth Kabayis, you could just go to hektish and take it away. It's no different than if I sold it. But if I gave it as a carbon, then you're out of luck because it breaks your lien.
Right. No, because I'm just looking at the article. He keeps on talking about the lender is Mekadosh property. That's why I'm a little confused here.
Well, we're going to be talking. We're talking about both things right now. We're talking about kol hecha de iktish loiva. We're not talking about the malva yet. We can talk about the malva soon. But the gemara that we're discussing now is if the loiva donated.
Okay.
If the halacha of the malva, the gemara is going to discuss in a minute. But first, we're discussing each person's rights to it. We've determined that the loiva, him being makdish, it won't help. We'll see what happens if the malva does in a second. So I love this concept that since the malva had an expense in redeeming the hektish, he could just add that to the chayv. So I have a friend who someone owed him a lot of money. Let's say he owed him $5,000. A lot of money is a relevant term. It's a relative term. Someone owed him $5,000, and the guy wasn't paying back. He was bugging him. The guy wrote him out a check for $5,000. He was very excited, but he knew that this check might not be good, so he had to certify it. Right now, he goes to the bank and he asks them, "Can I certify this check?" And the bank tells him, "No, you can't." So he says, "Well, if I deposited $500 into this person's account, would I then be able to certify the check?" So they looked up and said, $600. So he says, "Okay, I'm depositing $600. Then I want to certify the $5,000 check." And which he did. And then he went and took the check and he deposited. Perfect. His friend comes over to him a week later. You got it, what you are. What a chutzpah. How dare you make my check certifiable? You stole the money from me. Because by putting in the money, he was able to certify the check.
I love that.
You got it, what you are. Kavaltik. So Zog Tahela Gemara.
There was a fellow here in this Besmedrish that they did that too, right? One of the Gabon did that actually too,
Right.
and the added thing that he said, I needed that money for my wife's birthday present. I didn't need it for shul dues.
Did none. Did none. Most of oy dinner who put this in the chasam elo. Zok Gemara, he pleaded his oven malva. So now we're getting into what Mechi brought up. The machloikis of lemafreya hu goiva, which is what Abaya holds, and Rav holds mekan lebo goiva. Where would it happen off kamina if the malva sold it? So the malva doesn't even own this. All he's doing, he has a shibud on it. He has a lien on it, and he went and sold it, or the kaddish malva, or the malva went and was makdish it. Abaya Amar lemafreya hu goiva. Abaya said, if the loiva doesn't pay back, malva ends up taking it. So the halacha is keeping the matas mani v'loy pare, since the deadline arrived and the loiva didn't pay back. So therefore, igloy milsalam afreya. It shows us the mikara b'shusei havakai, that when the malva originally took it into his possession as a mashkin, the malva was konyed at that time, and therefore the shopper akdish, the shopper is often, and the hektish is valid and the sale is valid. For Rav Amar mikana labogoiva, even though I ended up taking it because the loiva ended up defaulting on the loan, nevertheless we don't look at it like the malva owned it until after the deadline to pay the debt back. Since if the loiva would have come up with the money, he would have been able to pay the malva back the cash, and he would have retaken possession of his mashkin. So therefore, when does it become irrevocable? It becomes irrevocable after the deadline to pay back his debt, and up until that point, we don't consider it that the malva has control on it.
You know what would happen if let's say the mashkin was real estate or something that went up in value and it was like a long-term loan? Like who
My shibud that I have in it is only connected the value of the loan.
But if that's what
That I have that much value in it.
But then it's not a Kenyan.
I hear. So it becomes a little sticky. I'm not sure how that works. It's a good point. You hear what Chaim is asking. What if the piece of property that we're using as collateral went up in value throughout the time? So according to Abaye, that you say to Mafreyo Goiva, who benefits from the inflated price of the property, the malva or the loiva? So that's a very good trial. So talking about keep ligi the aktish malva. The malva before the deadline to pay back the debt, the malva was makdish as a karka. He didn't give the chayv over. The chayv he wants to keep. He's just a karka, a la karka. And now that the deadline occurred, and he's going back to collect it from the loiva, the malva changed his mind. He doesn't want to give it for hektish. So the question is, when he donated it to hektish at that time, was the hektish chal? Rava holds it if the loiva would have been able to pay back the loiva b'yoyim hazman, then have a masalak the malva menakaka bezuzeh. He would have paid off the malva and he would have retained the property. Therefore, ishtakach lehoya karka kani lo yadayin come to chayis that the malva never had the karka. Ela achshav kishu goyva shebechayva hinikmisloi. Rather now, as the malva takes possession of the karka, only now he gets the kinyan, but he didn't have the kinyan from before. Zok to Gemara. Umi Amar Rava Hachi. Did Rava actually say that Abal Chayv mikana lebogayva? But Amar Rami Bachama Ruvain Shomach Hashat l'Shimon Bachrayis. So this is a very fascinating case. Ruvain sold a field to Shimon with a chrayis. The definition of a chrayis is Rashi. Shemi Yitled Abal Chayv de Ruvain Mishimon. What happens if Reuven owed money and there was a shibud on this piece of property that is sold Shimon, and the Reuven might not have the money to pay back? So Reuven's creditor, it might come to Shimon and take away the property. So here I paid Reuven $100,000 for a piece of property, and now some Baal Chayv comes and takes it away from me. I'm out $100,000. So if Reuven sold it to me with achrayus, then what happens is if my field gets seized by one of Reuven's Baal Chayv, I can go back to Reuven and he has to pay me. He can't say too bad. So the halacha is somebody thought about Chayv the Reuven Mishimon. Why would someone take it? B'shvil Chayv sheshibda like Reuven, because Reuven owed this Baal Chayv money prior to the sale to Shimon. So Shimon could go back. He has recourse. He can go back to Reuven. She shalom loy Reuven zeh ma'osav l'Shimon. Reuven will have to refund Shimon's purchase price. And what happened is Reuven, the halacha is Reuven would have to pay back Shimon for his losses, right? Shimon bought a property from him, paid him $100,000, and now the property was seized. So Reuven owes Shimon $100,000. What if Reuven doesn't have the $100,000? So now, even though there's a price there, Shimon's out of luck because Reuven might owe him $100,000, but he doesn't have the $100,000. So that's what happened. Huh?
Isn't it a simple lack of choice?
No, because the karka was not seized yet.
No, if you sell a karka without a chrayas, can he not claim it's a
No,
mekach tois?
no.
I wouldn't have bought
But
it.
it's the halacha is it's of kibul. If you buy a karka, you're accepting upon yourself that
The
risk.
possibility.
Correct.
Okay.
Unless the seller gives you title insurance.
Got it. Because the title insurance is the chrayas.
Right, exactly. So Reuven shemachas hadol Shimon b'chayis, but Reuven was a smarty pants here. Don't think he lost out. We're going to find out he got his way out of this. Reuven shemachas hadol Shimon b'chayis, the zakvan love mila, but Reuven didn't pay cash. It was a vendor take back. It was a VTB. So sure, I bought your karka for $100,000, but I'm not giving you money. We did a vendor take back, meaning I'm not paying cash for it. I'll pay up slowly, but I also bought it with a chrayas. What happened? Umeis Reuven. Now Reuven died. V'also b'chayv the Reuven v'torah f'lei l'Shimon. So now Shimon never paid for the karka. Reuven's b'chayv came along and took it away from Shimon. So what is Shimon to do? So what did Shimon do? V'also Shimon u'paisa b'zuzeh. Shimon said, "Listen, the $100,000 that I was going to pay anyway to Reuven for the field, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to the b'chayv, and I'll redeem it, and then I get to keep the karka." That's very logical. So look what a mess he gets himself into. Dina who the also b'nei Reuven, the Yisraelim could come, v'amrei Shimon, and they could tell Shimon, we got a problem, because anan metaltli shavak avun kabach. What did my father lend to you? The cash, right? Because you owed him $100,000 of cash, which was the purchase cash. That cash umetaltel diyasmei lebachayv lo mishtapte. The halach is metaltlin of Yisraelim are not meshubet to any bachayv. Any cash that a malva leaves over to his children is untouchable by any of its creditors. Properties are touchable, but cash is not touchable. So that cash was untouchable, and that cash you owed us. That was our father's money. So you had no right to give him that money. You still have to pay us back that money. So now you're still out. You're still out the money because you might have paid back Shimon. You might have paid back the bachayv. You Shimon might have paid back the bachayv and retained your property. But you can't say that too bad. I'm not giving the Shimon the money anymore because I gave that money to bail out my property. You still got to pay back the Yisraelim because that money that you used to bail out the property, you had no right to give. You had to give it to us. Zok Rashi, v'zok v'nolav v'nolva. So when Shimon bought the property from Reuven, he did a VTB. He didn't pay for it. So how you moist Shimon? Shepasuk al sadusu. The $100,000 that Shimon agreed to pay Reuven for the field, he didn't have the cash. Because of Reuven's star land, he wrote an IOU note to Reuven to oblige himself to pay that $100,000. V'shivit nechasav le'alem, and he was mishabed his nechasim to Reuven to pay Reuven the purchase price. Now, Umeis Reuven hamoicher. Reuven died. Ubaba chayve b'tarfa. Shimon, and now the b'chayve of Reuven came and seized the land from Shimon. Reuven's dead now, so there's no recourse to Reuven. But Shimon's lucky at least that he hadn't yet paid for the property, so he's somewhat protected. He didn't pay Reuven yet, and even after Reuven died, he still didn't pay up his debt. So what did Shimon do with the cash that he really needed to give to the Yisraelim? He paid off the bachayv so that he could retain the karka. So he messed himself up if he did that. Dinahu avagav avu and kabul alei achrayis. Even though Reuven accepted achrayis mechirzu, So therefore, Shimon should say, what do you mean? Your father accepted achrayis, so I should have a right to use his money to pay off his balchayv. Nevertheless, the Yisraelim can come to Shimon and tell him, "Anan metaltli shavak avud gabach." We don't know. All we know is that my father left $100,000 of cash by you. You didn't owe any type of karka to my father. You owed him cash. You had no right to give our money to the balchayv to pay him off. And even if you didn't pay off, the balchayv, if you kept the cash, you wouldn't have a right to hold on to that cash. You'd have to pay us that cash. The metaltal they asked me, that cash that you owe us is exempt from any type of shibud. So you just have to give it to us. The karka shall Yisraelim hudam rinan balchayv goyva isa b'chayv asavian. Only the karka of the Yisraelim, only land that gets left over in an estate, can creditors come and seize. Mishum de mechayim chol shibud alein. Because when the deceased was alive, there was a shibud that was on this karka that remains there. Of al moish lahoyu be'en, but money which is not be'en because nobel leitzonit no lechal shibudi mechayim alein. There was never a shibud on money. Uchachein be'en, when the money's here, which is right now, ein kan leva. Reuven's already dead. Ulabale hamois. And they don't. And they didn't lend any money. They didn't lend any money to the Yisraelim. So the Yisraelim don't owe them anything. The Yisraelim's father Reuben owes them because of the achrayis, but that doesn't mean that cash doesn't belong to the Yisraelim. So you have this guy now who's out $100,000 because Bezdin is going to force him to pay back now $100,000 to the Yisraelim, which was the payment that he owed the Yisraelim's father Reuben for the original purchase price. And he can't say that since I used that money to save the karka, which I had achrayis on, that's a separate cheshbon. You owe us money that's exempt from any shibud. And yes, an echanami, since your land was seized, the state owes you money, but the state doesn't have any money to give you because the state doesn't own karka. So Zok Rava.
Yes, I'm trying to get it straight. Okay, Reuven owed Shimon money.
No, Reuven owed Moshe Pipik money.
Okay.
Okay, and then he sold a field to Shimon for $100,000.
Okay.
So that field had a lien on it.
Oh, from the balchayv. Okay, Reuven.
Moshe Pipik, right?
Yeah.
But he also told Reuven, he also told Shimon, I'm selling you this land, but I'll stand behind it. If Moshe Pipik takes it away, I'll pay you back.
Okay, got it.
And then he died.
Okay.
And then Moshe Pipik came and took it away. So there's no Reuven anymore to pay him back.
So Shimon's out of the property, and Reuven's
So Shimon figured, listen, I didn't pay it for it. The money that I was planning to pay Reuven, I'll pay the balchayv, I'll pay Moshe Pipik.
and keep the property.
Keep my land. So the problem is, Shimon said you have no right to pay that cash to Moshe Pipik because that cash, which really belongs to us, because you owe it to our father, that was never meshubah to the balchayv.
And the
So
balchayv, and Yisraelim don't owe the balchayv any money now.
That's correct.
Wow. Okay.
So this guy's out of luck. But Amar Rava says, no, he's not out of luck. I'll tell you how we could fix this. See, he went to a Tayin, and Rava said, let me tell you what to do. If Shimon's smart, so now there's a claim against Shimon from the Yisraelim for $100,000. So what he should do is, Magvulu Ari, he shouldn't give them $100,000 in cash. He should pay them with a piece of property. Because if he pays them with a piece of property, then now that the Yisraelim have a property of the Yisraelim is meshubah to the balchayv. So if he gives them property, they still owe money for the achrayis. He can go back and seize that property to pay him back for the achrayis.
That I don't understand.
Let me finish the Rashi. So Rashi will explain how that works. Damar of Nachman, Yisraelim shagavu karka b'chayva saviyim. What happens if Yisraelim, Reuven died and he left over Yisraelim, and what happened was Reuven had to lend $100,000 to Shimon, and Reuven borrowed $100,000 from Levi. So now Reuven's karka is meshubah to Levi, and Shimon's karka is meshubah to Reuven, right? Because Reuven had a debt, but he also had money owed to him. So what happens if Yisraelim shagova karka b'chayva saviyim? What happened is that the Yisraelim of Reuven went to Shimon. Shimon owed their father money, so they seized a piece of property that belonged to Shimon to pay back a debt that Shimon owed their father. Levi Levi can come and now take that property away, because that property that was meshubed to Reuben all along, Hashem know the money. That shibud also went to Levi, so Levi had a shibud on that mechaim. So therefore, Levi could take it. So let's see Rashi. The Amar Rava, Shimon, if Shimon is a smart guy, Yitan v'yoyim what he should say is, my dear Yisraelim, I'd love to pay you back in full. But the problem is, Ein li mohis, l'froilechem, I don't have cash. Elakarka yeshli, I have a piece of property that I can give you. I owe you $100,000 because I never paid your father for the property. I'm going to give you a property worth $100,000 to pay up that loan. And as soon as they get it, now he can make a claim against that same piece of property and take it back. Why? Because when I originally bought the first property from your father, he was Makabal Achrayis, and the Bachayv took it away from me. So therefore, I can go on now back to this field. The hashtag agvalahu. Now, when he's going to take this piece of property back from the Yisraelim, ki agvalu ha'ara igloyim milsa the lav metaltlu the shavakabel karka. Now it turns out that it wasn't metaltlin that the father Reuven left to his children. It wasn't the cash that Shimon had to pay for the property with, which would not be subject to any claims. Rather, since Shimon paid back the kids with karka, we say that it was the karka that was always meshubed to Reuven's Yisraelim, which he ended up paying with. But karka already is subject to seizure by another bachoiv, so now I can turn around and take that money back.
Can Yosem say no go? We want cash only.
He could say I don't have cash.
So you can say sell your property and then give us the cash.
No, if he doesn't have cash, he's allowed to pay back his property like any loan.
Mm-hmm.
So bachoiv acher shalavim. So in our case, the same Shimon is the guy who owes the money, and he's also the guy who is owed the money. He's a loiva. He has a loiva relationship with the Yisraelim, but he also has a malva relationship with the Yisraelim. He has a loiva relationship with the Yisraelim. He never paid for the property yet, but he has a malva relationship with the Yisraelim is because of the achrayas. So balchoiv acher shalavian. If it's another balchoiv, so we're going back to the case where if the Yisraelim, if the estate seized property from Shimon, Levi can now come and seize that property away from them. Levi Shalavian can seize the property, the same property that these Yisraelim seized from Shimon for a loan that Shimon owed them. Levi can seize from the Yisraelim for a loan that the Yisraelim's father owed Levi. Alma, you see, Amrina, we say, if you take kaka for a chayv, we see that if we're saying that the shibud was chal while Reuven was still alive, this proves very clearly that when do we say that the malva gets possession of the karka? As soon as the original loan was chal. And that's why we're saying that this shibud was already chal in the days of Reuven. So again, let's just get this very clear. Reuven died. When Reuven died, Shimon owed him $100,000, and he owed Levi $100,000. So we say what happens is the estate, the Yisraelim, go to Shimon and they seize a piece of property. That piece of property that the Yisraelim seized because Shimon owed them money, Levi can seize that from them. Now let's think about it. If Levi can seize it from them, it means we're saying that property was meshubah to Levi. But that property didn't belong to Reuven at the time of death. So how could that property be meshubah to Levi if Reuven didn't even have that property at the time of death? We still haven't yet claimed it from Shimon. It must be that when Reuven died, even though he didn't seize that property yet, but he had rights to that property, we must consider the rights to that property as if already Reuven owns the property. And that's why when Reuven dies, Levi can come and seize that property away. So Zok to Gemara, since it's
against Mikam Laba. It's
that's exactly what the Gemara is asking. If you hold the Gabaya that it's the Mafreyo Goiva, then this whole scheme makes sense. Because we say that the fact that Reuven had a right to seize Karka from Shimon, even though he didn't, and the Yisraelim only did, but we look at it as if Reuven already had that Karka, and therefore Levi can come and seize it from him. So this is a raya that the Mafreyo Goiva. Bishlam if you hold the Gabaya, the Mafreyo Goiva, Amti Lahachi, Chayzer, the Goiva Oisa Mehen. That's why it makes sense why Levi, or in this case, where it was Shimon can go back and take the property that he paid the Yisraelim with, he can go take it right back. The command the Gavu, Mechaim Devundami. Because since you say Lamafrehu Gaiva, we look at all this occurring while the father was still alive. Because the father, we look at it like the father took possession of everything as soon as it was Meshubatim. But if you're going to have like Rava, that we don't say that anything changes possession until the actual seizure takes place, well then, how could now the second Bachoiv go take away property from Levi? I'm sorry, how could Levi come and take the property away from the Yisraelim of Reuven? If we only look at it like they get possession of what was Meshuvah to them when they take it, so then it's no different than if the Yisraelim was leftover cash. Let's say the Yisraelim had cash that was left over to them, and then they went out and bought a property. Nobody holds that property would be Meshubah to a prior Bachayv, because that property was something that the Yisraelim purchased now. It's not property that was in their father's lifetime. So therefore, if you hold Mekan Labo Goiva, why could the second Bachayv go and take the property away from the Yisraelim? It should be as if the Yisraelim went today and took cash and bought a property. That property would have no liens on it at all. If the Yisraelim went out today and bought a property with cash that was left over to them, nobody would argue that new property that they bought would be Meshubah to the Bachayv. So if you hold like Rava, this whole sugya doesn't make sense, because there's no way that the second Bachayv will be able to seize this property from the first Bachayv. Zok Rashi, if you hold like Abaye, that when they seize property, we look at it like this property belonged to their father at the original time of the loan. That's why the Bachayv of their father, the Levi, who their father owed money to, can take that land away, because we look at it like that land was in their father's possession when the father was alive at the time of the earlier loans. We look at it like the father took possession of it while the father was alive. If you hold like Rava, that we only consider it the karka of the malva once the malva actually took it. So when these Yisraelim got this karka after their father's death, it's as if they purchased property. How could the second Bachayv now take this land away from the Yisraelim? This is no different than if the Yisraelim went out and purchased property on their own with cash. Everybody agrees over there for sure the Bachayv wouldn't have access to that property. So that's according to Rava. How do you understand this whole thing? Zok to Gemara, we're not working with Shibud over here. We're not working with the Shibud of Karka. We're working with a whole different concept. Shiny Hasam, the Amr Lahu, the second Malva, so Levi, who's the second Levi, who's the person who the father owed money to, he can say, Ki heiche de mishtabadna le lavuchain, the same way Shimon, his property was meshubah to your father when your father was alive. That same property is meshubah to me as well, even before I took it already in your father's lifetime. You know why? Midir Abnasan, because of the new halacha of shibud de Abnasan. The Tanya Abnasan Aimer, minayin l'noisha b'chaverei mana, b'chaverei b'chaverei mana. How do you know that if Reuven owes Shimon $100 and Shimon owes Levi $100, you can have Reuven pay directly to Levi. Talmud Loimar, v'nasan lasher osham loy. You give the money to the person who the money is owed to. So let's see what Rashi says over here. Shani Hasam, the Amar Lukech, the Mishtabad Lavuchem, Mishtabad Nami Labachayv Davuchem, Midrab Nasan. Loy Lemekana Labagayv. We hold like Rava that when you take possession of a property that was owed to you because of a loan, you only have it now. When Rab Nachman said that the second Bachayv can take the land away from the Yisraelim, is Mishum the Amar Land Bachayv the Yisraelim, the Bachayv can tell the Yisraelim, Mikoich mi bosem the Gavisam Karkazu. How did you have a right to seize this property in the first place from the person that owed your father money. Obviously, because you inherited the shibud that your father had on that piece of property. Well, guess what, children? Just like this property that you seized from the person who borrowed money from your father, because that property was meshubah to you, guess what? That same property, even when your father was alive, was already meshubah to me. Because your father owed me money. And anybody who owes your father anything, automatically is meshubad li, owes me something as well. So there's a direct connection between me and the property that you seized from the person that owed your father money. Midir Abnasan, because of the famous shibud de Abnasan. My shibud on that piece of property was already there when your father was alive. I had a direct connection to that property even when the loiva had it, even before you seized it from him. Now, that was in the case where there's two separate people. But in the first case, where Shimon owed these children money to pay up for the property, yet the estate owed him money because of the achrayis, so Shimon Nami Amalul of Reuben, he could tell the Bnei Reuben, the same way I owed your father $100,000 cash to pay for the property that I purchased, that money that I owed your father, he owed me. That was also owed to me because of the achrayis. I might have been a loiva to your father, but your father was also a loiva to me. So therefore, because of Abnoson, if I owed your father money and your father owed me money, then I owed myself money. Right? If I owe you money, you owe me money, so then I owe myself money. The mali ani, mali acher. What's the difference if I'm both the malva and the loiva, or if it's two different people? It's the same thing. The shibud goes across. Even though your father did not have this property that I paid with when he was alive, the shibud will come back to me. So therefore, if this fellow is smart, Shimon will pay up the kids with karka, and that karka he can use the shibud of Nasan to take right back. Where does the shibud of Nasan? How does he know that if Reuven owes Shimon money, and if Shimon owes Levi money, Levi can claim directly from Reuven? Because it says Lasher Osham loy, the person who's owed the money should get paid. Lasher Hilveyu loy nemar. It doesn't say pay back the person who you borrowed from. It says pay back the person who you ultimately owe the money to, which is the malva at the top of the food chain.
You can kind of the same.
Let me just finish. El Lasher Osham loy, Lasher Karen Shaloy b'Bavakam Arminin Osham Zakaren. What were you saying?
Shibud de Reb Nosson is a logical thing, right?
Right.
Right? And the chiddush of Reb Nosson is that you're able to be toifus, you're able to be moitzi. Bezdin will force.
I can go direct, and I go directly to Reuben. Reuben cannot say la bal dom yet.
I got nothing to do with you. That's
Correct.
the chiddush of Reb Nosson. The
Correct.
problem is if you're applying the chiddush of Reb Nosson to the Yisraelim, to the case of Shimon and the Yisraelim,
Right.
it may not work over there because
Why
the
not?
Yisraelim are going to have the problem that there's a difference between karka and metaltalin by us. Karka is meshubit, metaltalin is not.
With shibud de Reb Nosson, it's also only karkas meshubit. I can't take metaltlin from. I can't seize metaltlin. I can't even seize metaltlin from a loiva. I could only seize
But
karka.
if you right, so shibud de Reb Nosson works when you're not working, but because when you're working with just different balei choiv. But with Yisraelim, they have this difference that certain things are
Well, their metaltlin are exempt,
right.
but their karka is not exempt.
Right. So therefore, by Yisraelim, the Yisraelim Ketaina, that the Shibud de Reb Nosson doesn't really work here because it's not Meshubah to you.
Any property that comes to the Yisraelim because of a choiv is meshubed to any creditor.
Right. You were Meshubah Metaltalin to me, and Metaltalin or not.
Yes.
No, it's not true. It's not true because if Shimon buys a property from Reuven, and he said I owe you $100,000, right? As part of that agreement, I tell Reuben, and if I can't come up with $100,000, then all my property is meshubah to you.
Mm-hmm.
So any loan that's a loan of metaltlin is backed by a shibud on karka.
Mm-hmm.
So here what's happening is I'm not paying you back your metaltlin. So you're gonna have to exercise your shibud on my karka, which I'm paying you. But once you exercise your shibud on my karka, that meshubah karka can come right back.
And the Yisraelim want money.
Right. So Mechi asked right away, why can't you say, we refuse to take payment in kaka, we only want payment in cash? He could tell them, I don't have, it's this or nothing. So since they have to accept it.
Tell him he doesn't have. He doesn't want to. Could he tell him?
Well, Rashi says, Yomer Elahem ein li mois lefroy lechem. Normally, if you borrow money from somebody, the agreement is you're going to pay them back cash, not that they're going to go foreclose on your property. So if you have money, you have to pay back money.
So if you
That's a normal loan.
So then why should you be able to say, I want to give you, why should you be able to say, I don't have cash, I don't have cash, I only have karka? The Yisraelim will talk and say, well, our father sold you to you for money, not for karka. We want money. Go sell your field and get karka.
I guess they can't say that. I guess they can't say that. Once there's a VTB, they can't say that anymore. Mechi, what are you saying?
No, I was trying to say that for Heinz Fee that Rava is saying here that he shouldn't give him money. It should be a karka. So that's where there is a shibud there.
That's right. Okay, so let's see the Gemara right here. Tanan. Nochri shehelva es Yisrael al chemsoi. So now we're bringing in our Mishnah and we're making it relative. We're seeing how it affects the machloikas Abaye and Rava. Nochri shehelva es Yisrael al chemsoi. Achar Pesach muter b'hana. That was our Mishnah. Zok the Gemara. If you learn that, like Abaye, that in fact when I end up taking the mashkin from you, when I end up taking the chometz from you, we look at it like it was mine all along. It makes sense that it should be muter b'hana because we look at it like it belonged to the goy all throughout Pesach. So it's not chometz she'over lava Pesach. If you hold like Rava, am I muter b'hana? Why would this chometz be muter b'hana? B'shusha di Yisrael have a koi. Throughout the entire Pesach, this chometz was in the rishus of the Yid. Zakta Gemara, and we're not talking about the default rules of shibud. We're talking about a specific case with our Mishnah. Kisher here hinu etzloi. You actually placed the chometz into the rishus of the goy. Let's see Rashi. Tanan nokli shehelva kosol kedai dechashta v'shaloi mosruloi. At this point, although in Rashi already told us in the Mishnah, the Mashkan of the Gemara, but at this point in the Gemara, we're assuming that the chametz remained in the possession of the Yid throughout Pesach. Rather, it's just there's a lien on this chametz. Then you could come to my house, the government chametz, and take this chametz. So the Gemara answered, it's being kisharina etzloi beveisai. So therefore, beveisai so nachri nasnoi. Because the time of mishum davelateris mashkin uvachoyv kind of mashkin. At this point, when the Gemara says kisharina etzloi, it's working with a din mashkin. And since I gave the mashkin to the goy and it's in the goy's house throughout Pesach, and you hold b'achayv kind of mashkin, that's why this chometz is not considered chometz shavel of a Pesach. That's what the Gemara holds at this point, which the Gemara is going to check. Lema ketanoi. Let's say that there's a machloek. This is totally another machloek of Shalem. Yisrael shehil v'lo al chemtzai la'achar Pesach einay over, which is not consistent with our Mishnah, right? Yisrael lent the goy money. We say that it's not in the rishus of the goy. It's not in the rishus of the Yid. It remains in the rishus of the goy, which is not like our Mishnah. Mishum Reb Meir Amr, but in the name of Reb Meir, they said over your over. So you see, there's a machlokes when I lend somebody money, is the mashkin considered in my possession or not? So let's say the machlokes is mamish toli in a bay of a rava. The Mar Sover the mandamar who holds that it is over, Meir holds who holds that the Yisrael is over, holds the Mafreyo Goiva. So we look at it like the chometz was in the Yisrael's possession all along. Umar Sover and the Tanakama holds ain't over, Sover Mikano Labo Goiva, that when I seize a mashkin, when I seize the money at the end of the deadline, we only consider it mine after that deadline. Fact Gemara, Tizbra, can you possibly explain pshat in the last brisa that we just had, that the machloikas of whether or not this chometz is osur b'hana is totally in Abaye and Rava? You cannot say that because ema seifa. Look at the seifa on the flip side. Aval nochri shehovol Yisrael al chemtzoi, but a guy who lent a Yisrael money for his chometz la'achar Pesach divra kol over. Everybody holds that it remains by the Yid. Now, if you hold that this machloikas is totally in Abaye and Rava shaila of l'mafreo goiva or mikana labo goiva, The case of the Seifa should be exactly the opposite of the case of the Reisha. The Mandamar were held that when the Yisrael lent the Nachri money, that the Yisrael's not over because we say Mikan Labahu Gaiva Hacha. Here on the flip side, when the guy lent the Yisrael money, we say that the Chametz remained by the Eid, and therefore it should be over. So you cannot learn Pshat in this Brisa that it's totally in Abai and Rabbi Shaila, because then in the Seifa, when the guy lent the Eid money, it should have the reciprocal, it should have exactly the opposite halacha. Now we're getting into a whole new sugya. It's already 6:51, so we better stop here, and we'll have to be mamshech tomorrow. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm sorry that we fell behind the Amud, but this is a mamshech shmaka sugya, and we'll already catch up.